The season opening losing streak is over. LSU beats Clemson 17-10. We've got your recap and reaction. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. How about them Tigers on a day where Texas was humbled at Ohio State? Alabama very clearly is burning, as if there was ever any doubt. They go on the road and get absolutely pummeled by Florida State. LSU made a statement. The real Tigers go to the fake Death Valley and hand Clemson a season-opening loss, the third in a row for Clemson, by the way, 17-10, on a day where the LSU defense was magnificent. This was, dare I say, shades of 2011 LSU. Pros at all three levels of the defense, making plays from start to finish. Even Jordan Gilbert, who started in place of A.J. Halsey, who was suspended for the first half. Jordan Gilbert played admirably in the first half. Halsey was outstanding for the bulk of the second half when he was in there. And LSU ends up suffocating Clemson, shutting Clemson out in the second half. Did you notice that? Clemson was up 10-3 at half, and the game finished 17-10. LSU shut out Clemson in the second half in their own building. And as a matter of fact, Clemson put together that one scoring drive. The field goal, of course, came after the Bauer Sharp fumble, and they had a short field. So LSU's defense, absolutely magnificent in this football game. We're going to dive into the game, some of the game flow here in the show today. And what I think is significant, we'll get into some of the individual performances, but I think this is really significant for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously, the psychology. LSU spent the last 9 months plastering 1-0 on everything. So some of you have rightfully asked the question, well, what happens if they lose? You focused for 9 months on being 1-0. What if you go to Clemson and you lose? Like, how do you rebound from that? Now, my feeling is that college athletes are resilient and they bounce back easier than fans would because they just get to start prepping for the next week, which in this case is Louisiana Tech. But you don't have to worry about that at this point. That was one piece, was worrying about the psychology of it. You don't have to worry about that. LSU won the football game, which is incredible. The other part of this that is super relevant is what this means for your path forward this year. Look, listen, we get this out the way. I picked Clemson to win the game. All right, so I was wrong. Happy to be wrong. I'll take whatever flack you want. But the game was exactly what I thought it would be. A really tough road game in a tough road environment. Clemson had an opportunity to tie the game when they had a first down and 10 scenario at the LSU 21-yard line there at the end of the game, trying to tie it. Clemson's a really good football team, and that's a really tough game. But, and I would suggest, and I have suggested and believe, this was LSU's toughest game on the schedule. It's not to say LSU's going undefeated. It's just to say, if you look at what is the toughest odds-on percentage of you winning a game, it would have been this one. All the reasons we talked about. On the road, Clemson, the most returning experience in college football this year. Playoff team a year ago. LSU working in a brand new starting offensive line, all the transfers, newness. And look, that showed throughout this game. LSU had two, would have been really costly turnovers. The LSU Tigers in this game committed 6 penalties for 45 yards. But man, were they costly penalties as well, which we'll dive into a little bit as we get into it. But this was, I think, your toughest game of the season, and you won it. So a lot of our conversation leading up to this game had been, if LSU loses this game, what does it mean for the playoff? And people had maybe labeled this a must win. And my point was, it wasn't a must win, because your clearest path to the playoff is winning the SEC. This isn't an SEC game. You could still, in theory, very capably make the playoff, even if you lost this game against Clemson. Well, now that you've won this game, you have bought yourself tremendous equity, because let's say hypothetically, nobody wants to see this happen, but let's say hypothetically LSU goes 6-2 in the league, which is certainly doable. That or I think it'll be better than that, but that feels almost like a certainty. If you go 6-2 in the league, well, then you're 10-2, you're in. And even if you end up going 9-3, you can still lean on the resume builder of going to Clemson and winning, because I think Clemson's winning the ACC. Florida State may have something to say about that. They looked really good beating down Alabama the way they did, but Clemson's still, you may ask the question, was Clemson really that good? Yes, Clemson's really that good. They're a very good team. But LSU went there with a very veteran team and handled business. I've said it this way several times, but it remains true. This is what a $20 million roster looks like. I go back and think about in fall camp, especially the beginning of fall camp, when the defense was sort of overwhelming the offensive line and people were so concerned about the offensive line, and with good reason. But now you see why it was so tough on the offensive line, because that defense is really good. I mean, we're not even talking about a healthy Harold Perkins, who led LSU in tackles, by the way. Whit Weeks, who's an All-American, by the way. And then you add all these guys at different levels of the defense who were outstanding in this game. I mean, the first play of the game defensively for LSU is Patrick Payton deflected a ball at the line of scrimmage. On the interception by Mansour Delane transfer, it was Patrick Payton who pressured Klubnik and forced him to sail the throw, which was intercepted. 2 transfers. I mean, that's what you paid for. That's why you want to invest in this roster, to get these guys, so you are immediately better there. So I think when you look at LSU, this is a team now that almost certainly will be a college football playoff team. By the way, I was just checking the odds at FanDuel. If you look at the national championship odds, Georgia, Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, LSU. LSU's got the 5th best odds to win the national, not just to make the playoff, to win the national championship. So in winning this game, it made your odds of making the playoff go up dramatically, because at this point, it would feel like an upset if you weren't at that point to where you could go at least 6-2 in the conference and be 10-2 overall, made the college football playoff. But very clearly, this team has their sights set on much bigger things as they move throughout. I'd be remiss if I went any further without talking more about the defense. My bold prediction for the season at 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge was that LSU would finish top 20 in total defense for the first time since 2017. Hard to believe it's been 2017, but 2017 was the last time LSU finished top 20 in total defense. That was my bold prediction for this year. Hard to argue against it now. LSU went on the road to Clemson and held that Clemson offense with Cade Klubnik, who last year threw for 3,600 yards and 36 touchdowns. That Clemson offense, led by Garrett Riley, to 261 total yards. LSU outgained Clemson 354 to 261. LSU outrushed Clemson 108 to 31. Clemson on their home field ran 20 times for 31 yards, an average of 1.6 yards per carry. Y'all, this defense was absolutely magnificent in this ball game, and they harassed Cade Klubnik all night long. LSU ended up with 4 TFLs, 2 sacks, 6 pass breakups, and 5 quarterback hurries, and of course, the interception as well. So an awesome day for Blake Baker's defense and a big, big stepping stone. There were 2 things coming into this season that we had big questions about, of course. safety and the offensive line were really the ones. Well, the defensive backfield answered emphatically their improvement. And the offensive line, I thought, was quite good as well in this ball game. Again, realizing what you're facing. A couple of all ACC preseason linebackers, Parker and Woods on the defensive line, dudes that are going to be first-round draft picks very likely next year. And LSU went out there, and that offensive line allowed just one sack, which came in the first quarter. Actually, it was the drive at the end of the first quarter that bled into the second quarter. So the sack was actually the 12-yard loss on a 2nd and 9 play at the start of the second quarter. And on top of that one sack, really, that was it. You ran 31 times for 108. And by the way, 12-yard loss on the sack from Nussmeier and 2 yards loss on the team total for the kneel down. So 14 more yards. You ran for 120 in this ball game. It was a really fun game to watch. Very well played game by two very talented teams that are going to be playoff teams, and we may very well see this game again. But it's very clear also, if you're watching this game, that LSU left a lot of points out on the board, on the field, and this could have been so much more one-sided. So we'll delve into that as we come back here. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet Ready. As I look for, there it is. Just looking at the graphic. My apologies. Rugiet Ready. It's the next gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain, boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in 15 minutes, effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. You've probably heard about Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love that it's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use the promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturer review. Please visit Rugiet's website for full safety information. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Just went through some of those odds for you there, but FanDuel is here, and FanDuel is the best time of year right now to check out our friends over at FanDuel. If you've not done so yet, make sure that you're betting with FanDuel this college football season. College football is back, and FanDuel can help you bet on all your favorite college football games. And right now, our friends over at FanDuel are giving you an amazing opportunity. Of course, the NFL season is almost here as well, so FanDuel is making sure you're ready with a kickoff can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So you want to get started on betting on your favorite NFL teams, do it now. Not super confident on the Saints, but find your favorite team, bet on it right now. And FanDuel makes it even more exciting. Whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, it's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your football Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So, LSU beats Clemson 17-10. A few other things that I want to talk about, big picture, and I'll dive into some of the things of the game. Number one, Garrett Nussmeier's night. I think the entire offense was a little out of sync in the first half, in large part due to the mistakes they made. When you kind of go through it, LSU moved the football. This may surprise you, but at the end of the first half, LSU had outgained Clemson 177-110. They had outrushed Clemson 65 yards to 19 yards. Clemson had 19 rushing yards at the half. LSU had 11 first downs to 6 at the end of the first half. LSU was seemingly controlling the game, moving the ball, playing great defense, but the mistakes were brutal. The Bauer Sharp fumble led to a Clemson field goal. I do want to give Bauer Sharp a hat tip, though, because if you go back and watch the play, Sharp fumbled, got up, chased down the defender, and made the tackle. Otherwise, that could have very well been a touchdown. So a hustle play by Bauer Sharp after the fumble to go make the play. But there was the Bauer Sharp fumble. There was on your first and third possessions of the first half, you burned timeouts, one before 3rd and 11, one on a 1st and 15 after you had an illegal motion penalty negate a 15-yard run by Caden Durham, which would have put you at their 33-yard line. You had so many opportunities in this ballgame. You had a holding penalty on the punt. You had so many opportunities in this game to break it open, and your mistakes early didn't allow you to do that, unfortunately. But, you know, they were able to overcome those mistakes. Garrett Nussmeier on the day, all that to say, I think Nuss really figured it out in the second half. Nuss was 28 of 38 for 230, a touchdown, no interceptions, completed 74% of his passes, and had a rating of 133.2. By contrast, Nuss completed 74% of his passes, Klubnik 50% of his passes. Nuss's rating 133.2, Klubnik 95.6. Garrett Nussmeier, I thought, was really good in this ballgame. The two things we wanted to see from Garrett Nussmeier: be willing to run the football and don't make the critical mistake. Well, he did have a 10-yard rush in the ballgame where he called his own number on a design play around right end, which was great to see, and he didn't make the critical turnover. Not only did Garrett Nussmeier not turn over the football, if you think back to the game and say, was there ever even a moment in the game where he put the ball in harm's way? Can you remember that? Because I can't. I didn't chart a single play where I thought Garrett Nussmeier made a careless decision that put his team in jeopardy. So that was fantastic to see. He also spread the ball around a lot in this football game. Durham, Xavier Thomas, Juwan Johnson, Nuss, Harlan Berry, Caleb Jackson. 6 different players had a carry, and 9 different players caught a pass. Aaron Anderson, Juwan Johnson, Berrien Brown, Bauer Sharp, Caden Durham, Trades Green, Xavier Thomas, Kyle Parker, Chris Hilton. You had 9 different players catch a pass, 6 different players run the ball. One of my big questions coming into this season is, with all of this talent offensively, how do you spread the ball around? How do you divvy it up to keep everybody happy? I asked Garrett Nussmeier that question point blank at SEC Media Days. Well, I think Joe Sloan did a pretty good job here. I'll also say, you know, for those that criticize Joe Sloan, I have no problem whatsoever with play call in this game from Saturday night. I thought Joe Sloan was in his bag, and I thought they were super creative. And I'm not just talking about the reverse where Xavier Thomas threw a pass. I mean, some play designs were outstanding, like coming off of the Chris Hilton false start. If you go back and watch that play, there was a beautiful design where everybody was moving to the left, and Aaron Anderson came back to the right. They hit him underneath, and he probably would have scored on that play if you go back and watch it. But it was one of those where the penalty blew it dead beforehand. Obviously, the formation to isolate Trades Green, where you have 4 receivers on one side to move all of the defense to one side, then you isolate Trades. What happened with Trades Green in those situations? He drew 2 pass interference penalties and scored a touchdown. So, yes, I thought the creativity was absolutely there offensively, and I thought Garrett Nussmeier was very good in this football game as well. The end of the first half sequence is something that I know everyone is talking about. And to set that scenario, if you don't recall, LSU's losing 10-3. So it's a 1-score game, but it's a touchdown. It's 10-3. And LSU gets the ball with 4:36 to play in the first half. And it's very important that they score here, or at least that they chew up the clock, because remember, Clemson won the toss deferred, so they're getting the ball to start the second half. What you can't have happen is allow them the opportunity to go back-to-back scoring possessions at the end of the first half, start of the second half. And, of course, you get the extra possession in the second half if you get the ball first in the second half, which is why teams defer. So LSU goes and puts together a fantastic drive that they go into their 4-minute offense, and they chew up a ton of clock there at the end of the first half. LSU ended up going for this was, let's see, it was 12 plays, 62 yards, ate up 4:27 off the clock, but they came away with no points. And we all know the scenario. Look, this was also the drive where Tyree Adams got hurt. We saw DJ Chester go in relief of him. They had a 3rd and 9. Barian Brown had the 14-yard reception, which was phenomenal. This was the possession where they ran the reverse with the pass that Xavier Thomas threw. I mean, Joe Sloan was in his bag, and they end up down there in the red zone and end up with a 4th and 2. They call a timeout. Coming out of the timeout, they throw a screen pass to Chris Hilton. So, I'll be very clear. I have no problem with throwing the screen pass. There's some people that have a problem with the play call. I don't. You called a timeout. There's 15 seconds left. That's plenty of time to run multiple plays. The average player is 6 or 7 seconds. So, understanding you're going to get a first down, and get a first down, the clock stops. So, there's 15 seconds left in the half. All right? You throw a screen to Chris Hilton. You're getting the ball to a senior veteran receiver in space. You need 2 yards. If he gets the first down, remember, you're coming out of a timeout, so you've already called the next play. So everyone's been aware. This is what's going to happen. We're going to run the screen to Chris. He gets a first down, stops the clock, get up to the line of scrimmage. We're throwing the ball into the end zone. You let Garrett know it's got to go in the end zone. It's either incomplete or it's a touchdown. And if it's incomplete, then the clock stops on the incomplete. You run the field goal unit out there and you get your 3 points. If it's a touchdown, great. That's the thought of how all that played out. But clearly, it didn't work. Chris Hilton caught the ball and fumbled. So you came away with no points. This is not hindsight 2020. I don't understand why coaches are allergic to points. And Brian Kelly does this every year. He did it last year. Opening possession of the season, LSU drove right down the field. They stall out inside the 10. They end up going for it on a 4th down, and they get stuffed. Same thing 2 years ago in Orlando. LSU went right down the field, 4th and goal. They end up going for it. They get stuffed. So eventually, I would hope that Brian Kelly recognizes this and starts respecting points more, but maybe it's his way of trying to show trust and faith in his guys to go forward in those situations. But I felt that was reckless. It was a 10-3 ball game. You kick a field goal. You can make it 10-6. You get yourself to a situation where a touchdown gives you the lead. But I didn't hate the play call. I just hated the decision to pass on points right there. The other thing I would say, and this is going to be true coming out of any game, you just have to clean up the mistakes. LSU wasted 2 timeouts in the first quarter. Bauer Sharp had the fumble in the first quarter. Chris Hilton had the fumble in the second quarter. As we mentioned, you had 6 penalties. Even go to the end game scenario where it looks like after LSU holds, receives the punt, and Xavier Thomas has an excellent return out near midfield. Now, all of a sudden, you have a penalty farther back, and that ends up being about 30 yards of field position when you're up 7 trying to salt the game away or trying to go get points there at the end. That could put the game away. So the penalties in this game were at times crucial. I'm just looking through some of my other notes. Damian Ramos hit a 52-yard field goal, which is outstanding. Harold Perkins Jr. Had a sack at the 4-yard line, which is big. That 3rd and 9 where you went to Barian Brown for the 14-yarder. I mentioned Bauer Sharp getting up and making the tackle on the fumble. I loved the fact that Joe Sloan committed to running the football. It's one of the things that we talked about a lot with LSU's inability to run last year. Was it really an inability or just an unwillingness? And they were heavily slanted 60-40 pass to run. Well, in this game, LSU showed much more balance in the offense, and they came out running the ball. I mean, the first play of the game, Caden Durham looks like he's stacked up on the line at the left side. He breaks free, runs to the right, runs for 24 yards. So there were some amazing moments there in the run game for LSU. And you saw the creativity. You saw on a quarterback sneak where Garrett Nussmeier sort of like walked up to the line of scrimmage like he was shouting out instructions, and he took a quick snap. Caden Durham was like pointing at the sideline as a distraction. Like all of that was well thought out and I thought well executed also. Clemson converting 2 4th downs on the same drive, their first and only touchdown drive, was critically important. Of course, they scored on 4th and 1 where it looked like LSU had the running back stacked up at the line of scrimmage, but he ended up breaking through. When Tyree Adams went out, it was DJ Chester that replaced him at left guard. That's really interesting because we didn't see DJ Chester play left tackle at all. I said guard, left tackle at all during the preseason. Chester exclusively played center guard, but what that tells you is he's their 6th best guy. If anybody goes down at any spot, he's the next guy in as your 6th best lineman. Williams, Williams, a wide receiver from Clemson, got hurt early in the game. That I don't know that I would say it definitively affected the outcome of the game, but certainly affected what Clemson was going to do, not having a dynamic playmaker by there. How about the second half? Mansour Delane coming away with a big interception. I thought this was probably the biggest sequence of the game. You go in a half, you're down 10-3. You need a stop and a score to tie this ball game and have it feel new, and you got it. They miss a 48-yard field goal to start third quarter. You get the ball on a 1st and 20. Aaron Anderson, 39 yards, the shallow cross where he cut up field for 39 yards. You were so close on a couple other plays. Kyle Parker converted a 3rd and 5 with a 16-yard reception. Anyway, you end up getting in the end zone with Caden Durham there on 2nd and goal. It's tied. Ensuing possession, you get the interception. And again, Mansour Delane gets the pick. Patrick Payton had the pressure, which caused the ball to sail. That was awesome to see. So now you're feeling really good. You just scored, 10-10 ball game, 2 plays later, interception. Your team gets the ball right back. You're at your own 46, or you're hovering right around midfield, and you put together a nice drive, except you continue to bite yourself in the T-Hiney with some mistakes. But this was the drive where I think this was the illustration of how different this LSU team is. On 2nd and 11, they went deep to Barry and Brown. Should have been a touchdown. It was ruled a catch down at the 1. They review it. We're all thinking, oh, they're reviewing it because he hit the pylon. He's in the end zone. Come to find out, they rule it an incomplete pass. I would tell you that is the most stunned I've been watching a live sporting event since the NOLA no call, where I wasn't even mad, angry, screaming, yelling. I was just sitting in disbelief. That was that call on Saturday with LSU and Clemson. But even with that, you missed the long field goal, and vibes at this point should be low. You've tied the game. You got to pick. You get the ball back. You're thinking, here we go. Let's go ice this thing. And instead what happens is you get screwed out of a touchdown and you miss a field goal. They get the ball back. What does your defense do? 3 and out. That was, I think, the defense, the sequence that will personify and illustrate this defense. In those types of situations, to be able to rise up the way they did was awesome. And after that 3 and out, LSU got the ball back, went down the field, and scored on the Trey'Dez Green touchdown reception. Then, of course, the defense did their job, holding Clemson out the rest of the way. It was a fantastic win for LSU football. For Brian Kelly to get a marquee road conference win like that, to do it against a team that was a playoff team a year ago, to do it after you hyped the 1-0 thing all off season, to have lost this game could have potentially been psychologically damaging for these players. It was so impressive to see LSU go into Clemson, get this marquee win, and set themselves up with an amazing opportunity moving forward to make the college football playoff. And of course, as they move their way through it, we'll be right here talking about it every day on Locked On LSU. Hey, the Tigers, Monday, of course, is Labor Day, but we'll be here, you know that. And the Tigers will be beginning their preparation for Louisiana Tech. So, as I was told, the only real injury from the game for LSU was Destin Hill. He was in street clothes in the second half, the transfer wide receiver. Other than that, LSU came out really healthy from this football game. So, Tigers beat the Clemson Tigers 17-10. And LSU now has a very clear path to the college football playoff. The big question is, how high is that ceiling? We're going to find out in pretty short order. Okay, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Do me a favor, if you're listening on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.